If you really look at Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, the biggest problem in the Bennet family isn't personality, romance, or even social drama. It's something much more serious and practical. At the center of everything is a legal rule that quietly controls their entire future, whether they like it or not. The real issue is something called entailment. This was a legal system used in England at the time, where property couldn't just be passed down to anyone. Instead, it had to go through a specific line, usually to a male heir. That means land, houses, and the income they produced were locked into a strict inheritance path. In the case of the Bennet family, everything belonged to Mr. Bennet during his lifetime, but he didn't actually have the power to decide who would get it after his death. The law had already decided that for him. The Bennet family home, Longbourn, wasn't truly secure for the daughters. It might feel like their home, where they grew up, where they lived their daily lives, but legally, it was never going to be theirs. Because Mr. Bennet had no son, the estate was set to pass to a male relative, and that person was Mr. Collins, a distant cousin who wasn't even part of their immediate family life. So the moment Mr. Bennet dies, everything changes instantly. The house, the land, and all the money connected to it would go directly to Mr. Collins. The Bennet women wouldn't slowly lose their lifestyle. They would lose it all at once. They wouldn't own the home they were living in anymore. They wouldn't have a stable income. They wouldn't even have the guarantee of a place to stay unless Mr. Collins chose to be generous, which is not something they could safely rely on. This is what makes the situation so serious. It's not just about comfort or status, it's about survival. Mrs. Bennet understands this very clearly if she doesn't explain it in calm or logical ways. When she constantly talks about marriage, especially marrying wealthy men, it can seem excessive or even annoying at first. But once you understand the legal reality behind their situation, her behavior starts to make a lot more sense.
The timing makes it even more stressful. No one knows exactly when Mr. Bennet will die, but the outcome is certain. It's like a countdown that no one can stop. Every year that passes without a good marriage increases the risk for the entire family. Mrs. Bennet knows that once that moment comes, there will be no time left to fix things. That's why she feels such urgency, even when others around her seem more relaxed. But when we move beyond the issue of inheritance, the next big problem becomes even clearer. Even if the Bennet sisters fully understood their situation, they didn't really have the freedom to fix it on their own. That's because, in their time, being a woman came with strict limits on what you could do with your life. In Pride and Prejudice, the sisters live in a world where women of their social class are not expected or even allowed to build independent careers. Today, if someone is facing financial trouble, the obvious solution is to get a job, earn money, and support yourself. But for the Bennet sisters, that path simply didn't exist. Respectable women, especially from families like theirs, were not supposed to work in public jobs. Working in a shop, an office, or doing any kind of visible paid labor was seen as something for lower-class women. If a woman from a gentle family did that, it would damage her reputation and lower her social standing. And once that reputation was damaged, her chances of making a good marriage would drop even further, which only made things worse. So even though they needed financial security, they couldn't just go out and earn it. Society had already decided that this was not their role. Their value, in many ways, was tied to how well they could marry, not how well they could work. If a woman didn't marry, her options were very limited, and none of them were comfortable. One of the most common paths was becoming a companion to a wealthy relative or acquaintance. On paper, this might sound respectable, but in reality, it often meant living in someone else's house, depending on their kindness, and doing small tasks to earn your keep. It was a strange middle position. Not quite a servant, but not truly independent either. You had very little control over your own life.
Another possibility was simply living on the charity of family members. That meant moving from house to house, relying on others for food, shelter, and basic needs. It also meant having no real stability and constantly feeling like a burden. For women who had grown up in relative comfort, this would have been a huge and painful change. Education wasn't a way out either. There were no college degrees waiting for them that could lead to a career. They couldn't start businesses or build something of their own in the way we think of today. Even renting a place and living alone wasn't really a practical or acceptable option for women in their position. Independence, as we understand it now, was almost impossible for them. This is what makes marriage so important in their world. It wasn't just one option among many, it was the only real path to a stable and secure life. A good marriage meant a home, financial support, and a place in society. Without it, everything else became uncertain and fragile. For the Bennet sisters, this pressure wasn't just coming from their mother or from social expectations, it was built into the structure of their entire society. Their future didn't depend on their talents, their hard work, or their ambitions. It depended on whether they could find a husband who could provide for them. This is also why Mr. Collins is such an uncomfortable but important figure in their lives. He represents the future that is being taken away from them. He will inherit their home, not because he earned it or because the family chose him, but simply because of the rules of entailment. His existence is a constant reminder that the Bennet sisters' place in Longbourn is temporary. If we strip everything down to money, the Bennet sisters' situation becomes even more serious. In Pride and Prejudice, their lifestyle is supported by about £2,000 a year, which comes from Mr. Bennet's estate. That income pays for their home, their food, their clothes, and the small comforts that make them part of the gentry. It's not extreme wealth, but it's enough to live respectably. Now, compare that to what they would actually have after his death. Mrs. Bennet brought £5,000 into the marriage as her dowry. That might sound like a lot at first, but when you divide it between 5 daughters, it becomes very small. And even worse, that money doesn't translate into a large yearly income. Altogether, the sisters would have less than £1,000 per year combined to live on. That's a huge drop. From $2,000 a year supporting one household to less than $1,000 split across multiple people. It means a complete change in lifestyle. No servants, fewer clothes, simpler food, and constant financial pressure. To understand how tight that is, look at someone like Mr. Collins. As a clergyman, he lives on just a few £100s a year. That's considered modest, even poor by their standards, and that's roughly the level the Bennet sisters could fall to if they didn't marry well. So what would they actually need to stay secure? Realistically, a husband earning between £2,000 to £5,000 a year. That level of income would allow them to maintain a lifestyle similar to what they were used to, comfortable, stable, and socially respectable. This is why certain decisions in the story are so shocking when you look at them financially. When Elizabeth Bennet refuses Mr. Collins, she isn't just rejecting an awkward proposal, she's turning down a guaranteed home and income. He may not be ideal, but he offers security, and in her situation, that's incredibly valuable. And when she later refuses Mr. Darcy's first proposal, the stakes are even higher. Darcy is extremely wealthy, far beyond what the Bennet family could ever hope for. Saying no to him, at least at that moment, goes against everything that would make sense financially. So when you look at the numbers alone, without emotion or romance, the pressure becomes very clear. The Bennet sisters aren't just hoping for good marriages, they are running out of time to secure the level of income they need to avoid a much harder life. Marriage in Pride and Prejudice wasn't just a personal decision, it affected the entire family. For the Bennet sisters, it worked almost like a group effort. If one sister married well, it could open doors for all the others.
When Mr. Bingley arrives and rents Netherfield, he isn't just an interesting new neighbor. He represents opportunity. A wealthy, single man in the area means a chance, not just for one sister, but for the whole family. If one of them, like Jane Bennet, marries him, it brings more than just her personal happiness. It brings connections, social status, and access to better circles. Those connections matter a lot. A marriage into wealth could mean invitations to London, introductions to other rich and respectable families, and more chances for the remaining sisters to meet suitable husbands. One good match could slowly lift the position of the entire family. On the other hand, one bad situation could damage everyone. This is exactly what happens with Lydia Bennet. When she runs away with George Wickham, it creates a scandal that threatens all of them. In that society, this kind of behavior didn't just affect Lydia, it reflected on her entire family. If Lydia had been abandoned, the damage would have been permanent. No respectable man would want to marry into a family with that kind of reputation. That means Elizabeth Bennet, Jane, and even the others could lose their chances completely. That's why Mr. Darcy steps in and secretly pays Wickham to marry Lydia. It's not about love, it's about fixing a crisis. By arranging the marriage, he protects the reputation of the entire Bennet family and restores their chances of making good matches. So in this world, marriage wasn't just about one person's future. Every decision, every success, and every mistake affected all 5 sisters. One good marriage could help everyone move forward, and one scandal could pull them all down together. By the time we reach the ending of Pride and Prejudice, it's easy to focus on the romance and forget how rare that outcome actually is. The truth is, Elizabeth's story is more of an exception than the rule. The marriage between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy feels romantic, but it only works because money is already secure. Darcy isn't just a good match emotionally, he earns around £10,000 a year. That level of wealth changes everything. It removes the fear, the urgency, and the risk that most women in that world had to live with. Because of that, Elizabeth is in a very unusual position. She can afford to say no the first time he proposes. Most women in her situation wouldn't have that luxury. Turning down a man like Darcy, even once, would normally be seen as a huge risk. But when she later accepts him, she isn't just choosing love, she's choosing love backed by complete financial security. This is where Jane Austen is being very realistic. She doesn't ignore romance, but she doesn't pretend that love alone is enough. For most women of that time, marriage wasn't about waiting for the perfect emotional connection. It was about survival, stability, and protecting their future. The Bennet sisters didn't have endless chances or unlimited time. They were working within a very small window, where the wrong decision, or even too much delay, could lead to a much harder life. That's why marrying rich, or at least comfortably, wasn't just a preference. It was something they had to do, because the system gave them almost no other way to live securely. So Elizabeth's real achievement isn't just that she finds love, it's that she manages to find love within all these limits. She succeeds in a situation where the pressure is high, the options are few, and the consequences of failure are serious. She doesn't escape the system, she navigates it perfectly, right before it closes in on her and her family. So when you look at the full picture, the Bennet sisters weren't chasing wealth for luxury, they were trying to survive in a system that gave them almost no other choice. Marriage wasn't just a dream for them, it was their only real safety net. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more simple and engaging history content like this.